Wholeness comes from the inside out.
When we're living congruently with our values, there's happiness because there is that sense of wholeness.
Wholeness is when the way of your being matches the truth of your being.
We are in Chapter 5 of The Fifth Agreement, A Practical Guide to Self-Mastery, and this chapter is called Truth or Fiction. He says in there, for centuries, even millennia, humans have believed that a conflict exists in the human mind, a conflict between good and evil, but this isn't true. Good and evil are just the result of the conflict. Because the real conflict is between truth and lies. Perhaps we should say that all conflict is the result of lies, because the truth has no conflict at all. The truth doesn't need to prove itself. It exists whether we believe in it or not. Lies only exist if we create them, and they only survive if we believe them. He says that the lies aren't true, but they're a distortion of creation, and we create them. His point is that the symbols are the ones that get in the way. They are the lies. Our descriptions or our use of vocabulary words to describe something is tainted by our experience. He says, he uses the example of a chair. And if we were to describe the chair, we would describe that it's made of wood or metal or cloth. But those are just symbols to represent the truth that is there in front of us, the chair. But we start to even go further because what we do is we use vocabulary words more likely in this way, saying that the chair is ugly or I hate this chair. He says the message is already distorted, but this is just the beginning. We can say it's a stupid chair, and I think that whoever sits in the chair might become stupid also. I think we have to destroy the chair, because if someone sits in the chair and it falls apart, that person will fall and break a hip. Oh yes, the chair is evil. Let's create a law against the chair so that everybody knows that it is a danger to society. From now on, it's prohibited to get near the evil chair. This is how fear gets created. It's by a distortion of the words that create fear, and then we believe them, and we'll move on to that later. But this has happened in my life quite a bit. A few years ago, I felt strongly that I needed to get certified in Reiki. Reiki is a Japanese technique that is a touch technique that is very calming to the body. And if you've ever had a Reiki session, you would know that you walk away in a much calmer state than when you arrived. Some people have distorted the truth of Reiki and made it seem as if there are promises that you walk away from that Reiki session and nothing ever goes bad in your life again. That is a distortion of the truth, because the truth is that you feel better, and yet there's a distortion that everything is better. And so things begin to make up about Reiki when someone comes along and later they don't feel good again. That Reiki didn't work. That Reiki's a problem, that Reiki's bad, it's evil. And over some layers of these distortions, people become very suspicious of Reiki. And yet the Reiki itself, the way of that I learned to lay my hands on certain parts of the body with certain intentions to add comfort and healing, with my intention to that spot, has become distorted as if I'm trying to have power over that person, or that I'm trying to take the place of medicine or things like that, when Reiki itself is just a benign system. But I can distort it with my intention, and those that put layers upon it can distort it with their belief in it being more than it is or distorting what it is. Robin, her husband, made a great analogy with a camera, and the camera can take pictures of horrible things, maybe things that are even wrong, but it's not the camera that is the problem. The camera is the tool. A lot of times that's what we do, is we put the layers, the distortions in places that they don't belong. And that's, I think, what he's kind of trying to open up and to shine some light on in this book. He says in the book, remember, our dream is controlled by what we believe, and what we believe could be true or it could be fiction. The truth leads us to our authenticity, to happiness. Lies lead us to limitations in our lives, to suffering and drama. Whosoever believes in truth lives in heaven. Whosoever believes in lies, sooner or later, lives in hell. We don't have to die to go to heaven or hell. Heaven is all around us, just as hell is all around us. Heaven is a point of view, a state of mind, and so is hell. Isn't that the truth? So it's a great little formula he's giving you here, is that suffering and drama are sure signs that we are believing in lies, that lies are existing. He says one of the biggest lies we hear at present time is nobody's perfect. It's a great excuse for our behavior, and almost everyone agrees. But is it true? On the contrary, every human in this world is perfect. But we've been hearing this lie since we were children, and as a consequence, we keep judging ourselves against an image of perfection. And in our search, we find that everything in the universe is perfect, except the humans. The sun is perfect. The stars are perfect. The planets are perfect. But when it comes to humans, nobody's perfect. The truth is that everything in creation is perfect, including humans. I think that's a powerful truth, because isn't that the case? Would we look at the tree? Would we look at the ocean? Would we look even at the clump of dirt and just sit there and consider it imperfect? And if we are, what are we judging it against? I like the way he says, judging ourselves against an image of perfection. The judgment of the image doesn't take into account the path leading up to that image, or the point. And so we judge the perfection against something else, somewhere else, with a different path or with a different purpose. Dr. Jeff, one of our experts, has a great book called Not Yet. He spoke and has been part of our live events. You can watch them on YouTube. Dr. Jeff is an amazing theologian. He's a doctor of medicine. You won't miss out if you look him up. Follow him on Instagram and on Facebook. But he has a great analogy about perfection, and he uses an apple. And he says, we have a perception of perfection. And an apple is a great way to show that perfection exists at every single point on its path. So when it's just a bud, that apple bud is perfect for a bee to get nectar. And when it's ripe, it's perfect to be eaten. When it's not ripe, it's perfect on the tree in that moment. When we take the apple off, when we cut it, it's a perfect slice of an apple. He even goes into an apple pie. When you make the apple into a pie, it's perfect. Even when, he said the other day, I was talking to him and he says, even when you take that apple pie out in the middle of cooking, if you compare it to a finished pie, then it's not perfect compared to a finished pie, but it's perfect for a half-baked pie. It is exactly what it should be. And that all along, when the apple on the tree is rotten, it's perfect to fall to the ground and plant another tree. Or when it's just before it's all the way ripe, maybe an animal comes along and bites it. It's perfect for the horse. Every stage has its own perfections. It's only when we compare it to another stage for another purpose, with another path leading up to that, that the perfection changes. And we need to do that with ourselves. Because there's one thing that's true, is that if you walked another's path, hitting every road bump, seeing every scene, having every experience, you would land in the same spot. And so maybe that spot is perfect. In the end, the period at the end of that sentence. He even says in the book, what about someone who is physically disabled? Is that person perfect? Well, according to what we know, that person may be imperfect. But is what we know the truth? Who says that what we call a disability or even a disease is imperfect? It is our definition of perfect that we have to look at. Is it really, really factually true? Is there no argument against it? Diamonds have a flaw. They have an imperfection. But that is actually why they are perfect. That is actually what we're looking for when we buy a diamond. So I think we need to rethink the idea that all creation except humans are perfect. He gives a little story, a scenario about imagining if you woke up in the 15th century with all that you believe now, all that you know, that you would show up and they would judge you for it. They would think you were strange. Things like taking a bath every day. Maybe even the belief, I don't know what century this was, but at the time when they believed the earth was flat, if you came and tried to explain that it was a sphere, they would think you were crazy. They would judge you. They might even kill you for beliefs like that. And he says even the way most of us relate to our own body is still barbarian. You know, they used to cover them up. They didn't clean them, right? So this is what he says. Our body is still considered a barbarian, though not as much as it was 700 years ago, but we still believe that way. Our body is completely loyal to us, but we judge our body and abuse our body. We treat it as if it's the enemy when it's our ally. Our society places a lot of importance on being attractive, according to the images we see in the media, on television, in movies, in fashion magazines. If we believe that we are not attractive enough, according to these images, then we believe a lie, and we are using the word against ourselves. Where is our perfection? Is it in comparison? That is not true. That is not the definition of perfection. And yet that's how we perceive it. That's what we take it on as. And I think our bodies pay the biggest price here, because with this idea of judgment against the human body and that it is bad or ugly or fat or weak, it's not just about the looks that causes problems with. We need our body to communicate with ourselves. It is the sensations within the body that are the things that we need to understand in order to perceive what's happening in the world and how we perceive them and what is true and what is not true. If you think about that perfection for a minute, notice in your body if your body repels that idea of you being perfect, or if it's able to take that on. What is that like? It's not just a thought process. It's an experience within our bodies. And we use those sensations to connect with other people. I was just on a long monologue this morning complaining to my husband about this idea, because when I'm needing to be empathetic, I need to be in the position of that person and feel within myself what they are feeling. And that's true empathy. And that's how we have connection. But if we don't have that ability to feel in about for our own things, then we can't do that for another. And if we have shut down the body, if we have cursed the body, if we have judged the body, if we don't let our bodies teach us because we let our minds have more importance than our sensations, which are the beliefs in the mind, or we just don't pay attention to those sensations, then we cannot connect in a way. I think it's one of the first steps we need to do as a society is move away from the judgment of the body, whether it's bad, nasty, ugly. All of that plays into really using the body for a tool to understand through sensation, truth and lies. This brings us to the third agreement, which is don't make assumptions. We make so many assumptions. When you begin to understand this concept, you will realize how many assumptions we make. He says we start imagining what other people are doing, what they are thinking, what they are saying about us, and we dream things up in our imagination. We invent a whole story that's only truth for us, but we believe it. One assumption leads to another assumption. We jump to conclusions, and we take our story very personally. Then we blame other people, and we usually start gossiping to try and justify our assumptions. Don't we do that? We do that. We make so many assumptions. The antidote to this is curiosity. When we can practice recognizing that we are making an assumption and get curious and ask so that we understand things, then more and more we don't make those assumptions because we understand that most of the time we've asked and the answer was different. So now we know not to assume. He remembers the other agreements. If not taking anything personally gives you immunity in the interaction that you have with other people, then not making assumptions gives you immunity in the interaction that you have with yourself, with your voice of knowledge, or what we call thinking. Making assumptions is all about thinking. We think too much, and thinking leads to assumptions. Just thinking, what if, can create a huge drama in our lives. He goes on, humans have a need to explain and justify everything. We have a need for knowledge, and we make assumptions to fulfill our need to know. This is certainty. And Anne Lamott has one of my favorite quotes, that the opposite of faith is not doubt, but uncertainty. And we are so afraid of uncertainty. We do not like it. Unknowing will not kill you, but it sure feels like it. It will, right? But this is a muscle that we can strengthen so that we can be in that uncertainty. Even in this moment, take a breath. Take a deep breath. And think of some uncertainty in your life. Just feel it. And be with that uncertainty as you breathe. Feel the sensations in your body that you have this desire to move and get rid of. But just notice it and be with it. And as you breathe in and out, notice that nothing is actually happening right here and right in this moment. That you are here, that you are here now, and that uncertainty can lift and shift. We don't know what will happen, but that's in the future. But right now, we can breathe. We can have compassion for those sensations in our bodies, those feelings that we have of uncertainty, that we don't like them. But let's just not resist it for a minute. And after a couple more breaths, we're okay with the uncertainty. And nothing has changed. Nothing has fixed. but we've just held it for a minute instead of trying to keep it at bay. Moving on to chapter 6, this is called the power of belief, which has been a huge influencer, this idea in my life, the power of belief. As children, we're taught, and people teach what they know. And he says that we are really taught the symbols or the vocabulary words. That's really what we're taught. We're taught in symbols. And we believe it. We believe it. And he says this isn't good or bad or right or wrong. It's just the way it is. And it happens to all of us. We are learning to be a member of our society. We are learning a language. We learn a religion or philosophy. We learn a way of being. And we structure our whole belief system based on everything we are told. We have no reason to doubt what other people tell us until the first heartbreak happens. And we find out that something they told us isn't true. Think about a heartbreak in your life that's similar to this. When a truth all of a sudden opened up and you didn't know. You know, has your children ever yelled at you, "You lied," because you told them something and then circumstances changed and you had to tell them something different. But to that child, it felt like devastation because they've been believing you all along. I think these heartbreaks must happen for us to begin to learn for ourselves, to really become ourselves. Otherwise, our belief is just a memorization of what someone else knows. But it does hurt, and it can be painful. And yet it is necessary. He tells a story about Santa, and he says there was a neighbor that wasn't a good boy, and they got a really nice bike. And he says, then you think to yourself, I was good. This boy was bad. How come I didn't receive a bicycle? If Santa Claus really knows everything that I do, for sure he knows everything that my neighbor did. Why would Santa bring a bicycle to my neighbor and not to me? All of a sudden, there's a break in this system of belief. He goes on and says, it's just not fair, and you don't understand why. And your emotional reaction is envy, anger, maybe sadness. You see the other little guy riding his bicycle very happily all around, behaving worse than he did before. And you want to go and you want to hit him or you want to break his bicycle. This is injustice. And you say to yourself, maybe from now on, I won't be good. I'm going to be bad, like my neighbor. Later, you discover Santa Claus is not true and he isn't real, but it's too late. You already released all the emotional poison. You've already suffered the anger, the jealousy, the sadness. You already suffered. So it doesn't matter that now all of a sudden it wasn't true. Another scenario of this is that in this incongruency where I don't understand, this didn't work the way the equation's supposed to work. Good people get good things, bad people don't get good things. When things like that break, sometimes in that incongruency, what can happen, especially in childhood, is that we really believe we are bad. So that we are now that's what this book is so important for, those kinds of experiences. He talks about the process of what we learn and how that happens, and all of that comes together, and this becomes our belief system. He says the belief system is in the realm of the mind. We cannot see it or measure it, but we know that it exists. Perhaps what we don't know is that this structure only exists because we created it. Our creation is completely attached to us. It follows us wherever we go. We've been living this way for so long that we don't even notice that we live in this structure. And even though the mind isn't real, it's virtual, he says, but it has total power. The antidote to gain some of this power back is awareness. Awareness is the key. We can't always go against our human nature, but we can become aware of it. This brings us to chapter 7, and it's called Practice Makes the Master. He says, everything you have ever learned, you learned through repetition and practice. You learn to talk, you learn to walk, you even learn to write by repetition. You are a master of speaking your language because you practice. This is the same way that you learned all the beliefs that rule your life, by practice. The way you are living your life right now is a result of many years of practice. During your whole life, you practiced every moment to become what you believe you are right now. You practiced until it became automatic. And when you start practicing something new, when you change what you believe you are, your whole life is going to change. If you practice being impeccable with your word, if you don't take anything personally, if you don't make assumptions, you're going to break 1,000 agreements that keep you trapped in the dream of hell. Very soon, what you agree to believe will become the choice of your authentic self, not the choice of the image of yourself that you thought you were. This brings us to the fourth agreement. And he says the first three agreements may seem difficult to do. They may even seem impossible for us to do. Well, believe me, it's not impossible, he says. But I have to agree that it is difficult because we practice exactly the opposite. All our lives we practice believing the voice in our head. But there is a fourth agreement, and it's easy. This is the agreement that makes everything possible. Always do your best. You can do your best, and that's it. No more, no less. Just do your best. Take action. He describes that a little further by saying, your best will depend on whether you are feeling physically tired or refreshed. Your best will depend on how you are feeling emotionally. Your best is going to change over time, and as you form the habit of practicing the 4 agreements, your best is going to get better. So our best is not doing 50% sometimes and 20% sometimes and 100% and 90%, but it's doing 100% all the time. But our 100% always changes. I posted a quote a while back that came to me that's very much in line with this, and it says, I'm doing my best, not your best. And that's the way it should be. We're always doing our best. Again, back to it's the comparison that changes that. And we believe the comparison, that lie. We believe in the comparison when the truth really is different. My 100% really doesn't go against somebody else's 100%. Just do your best. He talks about, like we said before, that all that he's talked about up until now, all that he's warned us of even, it will happen. It's human nature. He says, if you're going to create anyway, if you cannot avoid dreaming, then why not create a beautiful dream? You have a mind, you perceive light, you are going to dream. Why not dream well and really enjoy your dream? If you can believe in your limitations, then why not believe in the beauty and power of life that's flowing through you? Life gives us everything, and everything in life can be a pleasure. Why not believe in the generosity of life? Why not learn to be generous and kind to yourself? And the trick is that may sound difficult, but we're only doing our best at it, right? That's what he's trying to teach here. We need to use these agreements to work in our humanness, with our humanness, for our happiness. And the fourth agreement helps us bring in that humanness. He says, you learn by making agreements, and you unlearn by breaking agreements. Every time you break an agreement, the power of faith that you invested in that agreement comes back to you, because you no longer need to spend your energy to keep that agreement alive. You start by breaking agreements that are small and require less power. As you unlearn, you begin to dismantle the structure of your knowledge, and this frees your faith. As you recover your faith, your personal power increases. Your will becomes stronger. This gives you the power to change another agreement, and then another and another. Your personal power keeps growing and growing, and because you're much more powerful, you find that almost anything is possible. Soon you are making agreements that lead you to happiness, to joy, to love. Then these new agreements come alive and begin to interact with the outside world, and your whole dream changes. Breaking agreements looks like questioning some of these ideas you have about yourself. Are you really ugly? Are you really fat? Are you really stupid? Simply disagree with everyone else. Maybe everyone else on the planet would agree, but you disagree. And just see what happens. Finally, in order to really disagree, he says you only have one tool to do this, and that tool is doubt. Doubt is a symbol, of course, but what it means is very powerful. With the power of doubt, you challenge every message you deliver and receive. You challenge every belief in your book of law. Then you challenge all the beliefs that rule society until you break the spell of all the lies and superstitions that control your world. He says, as you will see in part 2, the 5th agreement gives you the power of doubt. We invite you to thewholenessnetwork.com, where you'll find the Wholeness Library. Inside, you'll find tutorials, downloads, mini classes, and all sorts of streaming content for you on your wholeness journey.